When people think about the fall of Rome, they often imagine barbarian hordes smashing gates, emperors assassinated in cold marble halls, or armies crumbling under foreign attack. But the truth is far more subtle and far more powerful. Empires do not collapse merely from the outside, they rot from the inside, and one of the deadliest internal enemies has always been money. Rome's story is not just about battles lost or political intrigue. It's about currency destroyed and trust betrayed. For centuries, Rome's economic backbone was the silver denarius. First minted around 211 BC, it was nearly pure silver, widely trusted across the empire. Soldiers were paid with it, merchants demanded it, and citizens stored their wealth in it. This coin was not just currency, it was confidence in tangible form. The denarius value was intimately tied to the strength of Rome itself. As long as people believed in the empire, they believed in its coins. But as Rome expanded, maintaining an empire became expensive. Soldiers needed pay, roads and aqueducts required funding, and foreign campaigns drained the treasury. By the 2nd century AD, Rome faced mounting costs it could not cover with taxes alone. So emperors resorted to a familiar trick: debasement. Instead of asking citizens for more taxes, always unpopular, they reduced the silver content in the denarius. Under Augustus, the coin was 95% silver. By Caracalla's reign in the early 3rd century, it dropped to around 50%. Under Gallienus in the mid-3rd century, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. A coin that once gleamed with metal became a bronze disc with only a thin silver wash. People could see and feel the difference. Inflation followed almost immediately. Prices soared because the money was no longer anchored in real value. A loaf of wheat that once cost 1 denarius might now cost dozens. Soldiers demanded higher wages to survive. Merchants refused the debased coins, and barter made a quiet comeback. The more confidence eroded, the more emperors debased coins, hoping that sheer quantity could replace true value. This cycle would repeat for centuries. Across the globe, the same pattern visible in every major inflationary crisis in human history. Rome's currency crisis was not a one-time event. It was the blueprint for economic collapse, showing how the erosion of trust in money can corrode even the mightiest of empires. As the denarius lost value, the cracks in Rome's economy deepened. By the mid-3rd century, the empire was in what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. Between 235 and 84 AD, Rome faced 50 years of near-constant chaos. Emperors came and went like leaves in the wind, sometimes ruling for mere months before being assassinated. External threats loomed large. Germanic tribes pressed in from the north. Parthians tested the eastern borders, and internal rebellions ignited across provinces. But the true danger wasn't just foreign invasion, it was economic collapse. Taxes were demanded in coins that held ever less value. Farmers, unable to pay, abandoned their lands. Local trade networks fractured, leaving towns isolated and markets broken. The denarius, once a symbol of Rome's power, had become a tool of desperation. In response, Rome tried radical measures. One of the most infamous was Emperor Diocletian's edict on maximum prices in 301 AD. It aimed to fix the cost of more than 1,000 goods and services, from grain to wages. Violators faced death. Yet the law failed spectacularly. When money has no real value, you cannot control prices with a decree. Black markets flourished, essential trade slowed, and desperation spread. Romans learned the hard way: a law cannot restore faith in a currency stripped of value. Meanwhile, the very lives of ordinary Romans were upended. Soldiers demanded higher pay, yet their wages couldn't keep pace with skyrocketing prices. Merchants, fearing debased coins, preferred barter or payments in gold. Families saw their savings evaporate, their standard of living collapse. The empire, once a model of order and infrastructure, began to resemble a fragile house of cards, and every attempt to patch the economy, forcing labor, controlling prices, minting more coins, only made the underlying rot worse. Eventually, Rome abandoned the denarius. Around 312 AD, Constantine the Great introduced the solidas, a gold coin of consistent purity. It restored some stability and would last for centuries in the Byzantine Empire. But for the Western Roman Empire, the damage was already irreversible. The debasement of currency had hollowed out its economic core. Armies could no longer be sustained. Trade networks were broken, and the trust that underpinned society had vanished. Rome's fall was not the result of a single catastrophic event. It was a long unraveling, a story repeated throughout history. Whenever money is debased, trust is lost. and ordinary people bear the brunt. Understanding this pattern is crucial, because while Rome's crisis happened nearly 2 millennia ago, the same principles govern every modern economy. When governments treat money as a tool to paper over debts or finance unchecked spending, the consequences ripple through society just as they did in ancient Rome. Rome's lessons didn't end with the empire. The collapse of the denarius is a blueprint we see echoed throughout history. Governments that attempt to manipulate money to cover debts or fund excessive spending always pay a price, and ordinary people always suffer first. Consider Germany after World War I. The Treaty of Versailles imposed crushing reparations. The government, desperate to meet these obligations, turned to the printing press. Just as Rome had minted debased coins, the Weimar Republic produced more marks, thinking that money alone could solve its problems. By 1923, hyperinflation had reached unimaginable levels. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark before the war now demanded over 200 billion marks. People carried cash home in wheelbarrows. Life savings evaporated overnight. Pensioners starved, while those holding tangible assets, land, factories, foreign currency survived. Zimbabwe followed a similar tragic path in the early 2000s, faced with declining agricultural output, rising debt, and economic mismanagement. The government printed money to cover its obligations. Inflation spiraled, reaching 89.7 sextillion% annually by 2008. Prices doubled almost daily. Shops couldn't update tags fast enough. Eventually, the Zimbabwean dollar collapsed entirely. Citizens were forced to rely on US dollars or South African rand. Once again, the illusion of paper money had failed, and ordinary people bore the unbearable cost. Even in modern developed economies, the pattern remains. In 1971, the United States severed the dollar from the gold standard. From that moment, the dollar became a fiat currency backed not by gold, but by trust in government. Over the decades, debt expanded, money supply increased, and inflation slowly eroded purchasing power. A dollar that could buy much in 1971 now buys only a fraction of that. Coins and bills look the same, but their real value has been hollowed out. The trick is always the same. Governments disguise inflation as prosperity. Rising wages are presented as wealth, even as prices outpace them. Stock markets are held up as proof of progress, even when the majority own little. Debt is portrayed as investment, even when it merely finances consumption. And just as Roman emperors debased coins while pretending all was well, modern governments quietly extract value from citizens' earnings and savings. This is the hidden tax that has broken empires for 2,000 years. Inflation is never accidental, it is policy, and it is insidious because it does not announce itself loudly. It creeps in, eroding trust and stability before anyone fully realizes what has happened. By understanding Rome, Weimar Germany, and Zimbabwe, we can see the same forces at work in today's world. Governments treating money as a tool to solve short-term problems, while ordinary people pay the price. The danger of money mismanagement today is greater than ever. Unlike Rome or Weimar Germany, the world now operates on a vast, interconnected system of fiat currencies, massive debts, and central banks that can print trillions at a moment's notice. When one major economy falters, the consequences ripple globally. What once was the collapse of an empire or a nation can now affect millions across continents. Take the United States, for example. Since abandoning the gold standard in 1971, the dollar's value has been backed solely by trust. Trust that has been tested repeatedly. Debt has ballooned from a few $100 billion in the 1970s to tens of trillions today. Money supply has expanded drastically. Inflation, though sometimes subtle, has steadily eroded purchasing power. While we may not yet see wheelbarrows of cash, ordinary people experience the effects in rising housing costs, grocery prices, and shrinking savings. Central banks have become the new emperors, wielding unprecedented power. Through interest rates, quantitative easing, and bond purchases, they attempt to maintain the illusion of stability. Yet history reminds us that no matter how sophisticated the tools, the principle remains the same. When money is artificially manipulated, trust eventually breaks. Rome had the denarius. Today, we have the dollar, the euro, and countless other fiat currencies. When confidence falters, societies unravel. What makes this even more precarious is the scale of modern economies. Rome's collapse affected tens of millions. A national crisis in Weimar Germany or Zimbabwe affected millions more. Today, a global financial shock could destabilize billions, from pensioners to workers in every continent, while the elite with tangible assets often escape unscathed. Just like in Rome, those who hold real wealth, land, businesses, gold, or other resources are protected, while those relying on salary, savings, or pensions are exposed to the silent erosion of value. The lesson is clear: governments can mask inflation temporarily, but the fundamental truth never changes. Money is a social contract built on trust. When that trust is broken, contracts fail, trade halts, and societies fracture. Armies cannot be maintained, public services crumble, and legitimacy of leadership erodes. The barbarians at the gate may be the headline, but the real killer always lies within the treasury. History has been warning us for centuries. Rome, Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe all teach the same lesson. Currency collapse is a symptom of deeper systemic failure, and the consequences are borne by those least able to defend themselves. The path from minor inflation to societal instability is not a straight line, but the trajectory is predictable once trust erodes. Understanding this pattern is crucial for anyone who wants to navigate the modern world without falling victim to the same mistakes. So, what does all of this mean for you and me? The fall of Rome, the hyperinflation in Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe's currency collapse, and modern fiat systems all share the same lesson: when money loses its value, society unravels. It is not always sudden, but it is relentless, and the victims are almost always ordinary people, while those holding real assets often escape largely unscathed. First, recognize that inflation is not an accident. It is a policy choice. Governments manipulate money to cover debts, finance spending, or mask economic weakness. The silent tax falls on everyone whose wealth exists only in paper or digital numbers. Understanding this allows you to act rather than be acted upon. Second, real wealth is not in currency. It is in assets that retain value when money does not land. Productive businesses, skills, precious metals, or resources that society continues to value regardless of government decisions. Rome citizens who hoarded gold, Weimar Germans who held foreign currency, and Zimbabweans who possessed land fared far better than those trusting paper alone. Third, never assume stability is permanent. Romans in the 1st century would have laughed at the idea that their coins would one day be worthless. Germans in 1913 would have scoffed at the notion of wheelbarrows filled with cash. Zimbabweans in the 1980s assumed independence meant prosperity. In each case, the lesson was the same: financial systems can collapse slowly, then suddenly, as trust evaporates. Fourth, pay attention to the scale. Rome was a single empire, Weimar Germany a nation, Zimbabwe a country. Today, the entire world operates on interconnected fiat currencies, massive debts, and central banks willing to print trillions. A collapse today would ripple globally. Ordinary people will suffer first. Elites, often insulated by tangible assets, will weather the storm. Finally, understand the human dimension. Money is not abstract. It underpins society itself. When it fails, contracts break, trade halts, armies dissolve, and governments lose legitimacy. Barbarians at the gates may finish the job, but the real killer has always been inside the treasury. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes, and it is merciless if ignored. Rome's currency crisis wasn't just about bad emperors or greedy elites. It was about the fragility of money when abused. That fragility has never gone away. By learning from the past, we can make informed choices, protect our wealth, and better understand the invisible forces shaping our world today. If this perspective gave you new insight, remember, history holds the answers, and the lessons are timeless. Watch closely, learn, and act wisely.